Hey,
Hello.
hey, how you doing, Eric?
I'm doing well. So are we both on the air right now?
Yeah, everybody in here is on the air. We're just gonna wait a few minutes for people to join and get signed in.
Okay, welcome everybody. And just to let you know, this is sort of an informal meeting. That tonight I'm kind of going to give an introduction about what the company is, and then of course talk about some of the new things that we're working on, and including a new website that we're all putting all together, a new membership system, and all that. And then we're going to be taking all your questions. I really want this to be focused on you guys tonight. So if you have any questions you have, write them down and don't forget them. We should have a section where you're going to be able to put those in the chat box. Is that right?
Yep. We have a chat right along the side, and then there. Yeah, there's also.
Here, and I'm going to take my bulky headphones off and put in my earbuds so I don't look like an alien.
You look like an alien.
All right, there we go.
You still look like an alien.
I know. Well, I do the best I can. But no wonder I didn't fit in high school.
We'll just wait a few more minutes and then kick it off. So, my name's Jason, and I've been working with Eric and Joshua, who's running the Subtle Energy account here for the last couple months, just developing the new website and helping him organize all of his genius a little bit.
Yeah, I really appreciate if you let me jump in, Jason. Yeah, this is Jason Shaver, and he and Joshua Seymour are part of the Euphoric Media team, and we're working together to build a new website online presence for Subtle Energy Sciences. They're basically going to be working for the next several months on the back end, getting things streamlined so that when you all and new customers purchase new products or just want to log in to have access to your existing product, you'll be able to get those 24/7. They'll always be there waiting for you, accessible to any phone or computer. And so that's going to be really great. Also, you know, we have customers who don't always like PayPal, so we're working on a new streamlined payment gateway system. We'll have a new robust affiliate system for those of you who are interested in working with us and spreading the word. And we'll even have some affiliate training to go along with that as well. Jason's pretty gifted at the Facebook ads thing. He knows how to get responses and get a good return on an investment for that. So, you know, somewhere down the line, Jason will be offering free training for that as well for the affiliates. And what else we got? You know, the whole new system's sort of set up like a membership system. So when you log in, you can see other people who are logged in. You can have discussions and send messages between members and so on and so forth. So we're really excited about this. Occasionally, the new system that or the current system we've been using, which is on the payload server, occasionally we get customers saying that they didn't receive their product email download. So what we generally do is we send them a message, we apologize, and then we send them a free gift as well as their product. But you know, Payloads has not really been very responsive in improving that situation, and there's nothing we can do about it. So we're switching to an entire system. So over the next probably the next 4 to 6 months, you'll see these ongoing changes, and you're going to see that the website change dramatically.
Yeah, for sure. That's what we're working on, and as we're able to do that with Eric, he's going to be able to release some of the more depth and genius he has as far as products are concerned. So we hope everybody is it's on the new site is enjoying it so far. Just mainly new customers and beta testers, but we're, like you said, we're working on getting everybody in that back office and having forums in different places where everybody's experiences with the different technologies can be documented. So since this is a relatively new, I mean, it's an ancient field, but a relatively new field, so we can learn how the collective is best using their meditation products, their mandalas, and maybe different techniques that can help others. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. And before I ever even started working with Eric, I was a consumer of his products for at least a couple of years, ever since I Awake and the Profound Meditation Program. That's what I started with. And everything that he released, Heartwave, Healing Light, the neurochargers, whatever, I would always come back and check the site. And I know that people are checking the site right now because we were giving away a free mandala. We just put it up there. Patience was it, and we had a bunch of people downloaded it right away. We weren't even supposed to do that yet, but so I know what it's like to be combing through that site, and we just want to make the experience the best possible experience and really integrate it for everyone that visits it.
Yeah, I think you guys are doing a great job, Jason. Yeah, and everyone on the line here and all of our customers, your feedback on the new system, what's working, what isn't, is going to be crucial in helping us get this all developed.
Yeah. So I guess since it's Mitch, Josh, and I in here yet, we put the link out for people to join live. I see quite a few people watching on the live link, but maybe they don't know how to join yet. So I posted a link there. But if you just want to start and talk a little bit about just an introduction to the science of what you do and how you first came across this kind of technology, and just a general overview of what subtle energy is for those that are new to it.
Sure. Before I do, I'd just like to welcome everybody again. I know we probably still got people getting on, and we do apologize. This is a bit informal. We don't have everything together, so this is the first time we've done this. So please excuse us. Do know that we plan on doing this bi-weekly. We're going to offer. So basically, 2 weeks from now we'll be here again, and you're welcome back. And please feel free to invite other people. And bi-weekly, we're going to be doing this as a free, a free sort of support arm to reach out, to answer your questions, to offer any kind of guidance we can into getting the most from these tools. And we just hope that it really serves you. So just know that we're going to be coming back and doing this every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. That way it's 6 p.m. on the West Coast, and hopefully other time zones won't have too much trouble getting on with us at that time. So an intro to subtle energy. The name of the company, of course, is Subtle Energy Sciences, and I use the term subtle energy because it's probably the most scientific term that we have that relates to this particular phenomenon that I'm going to be speaking about. If you've ever heard the terms life force, chi, prana, orgone energy, kundalini energy, aura, mana, ki, there are dozens and dozens of terms for this idea of subtle energy that exists throughout most cultures, and even in the scientific literature you'll find different scientific circles who've studied this phenomenon, and they will give it a particular name that's different from the other scientists that are studying it because they're not aware of the research they're doing. In other words, they're doing this independently, but they're all finding very similar types of findings, and they're using different names to describe what they're seeing. So the term subtle energy itself relates to, of course, energy. You've heard of the famous Einstein equation, E equals mc squared. E stands for energy, m stands for mass, c stands for the velocity of light squared. So essentially, if you take everything and you speed it up, if you take all matter and you speed it up to the speed of light squared, it becomes pure energy. That's the basic idea, that energy and matter are equivalent. They're the same thing, rather than being two different things. As simple as that seems, that hasn't always been apparent to civilization. That particular understanding is considered pretty important right now. Now, but what's missing, in my opinion, this is not something I've gotten from a book, but in my opinion, as smart as Einstein was, and I certainly don't claim to be his equal. I'm not, and I'm certainly not speaking against him in any way. I have nothing but the highest respect for him. And yet, in my understanding and in my research, I find that there's something missing in that formula, because essentially there's an informational component to energy that's not accounted for in that formula, and I can illustrate that thusly. Basically, so what that means is, let's say we take everything on Earth, all the matter on Earth, including the Earth itself, and we speed it up to the speed of light squared, and it becomes pure energy. So now we have this field of pure energy, pure potential. Now let's say we slow it all down again. In other words, we reverse that formula so that it gets slowed back down, because it's been said that that matter is nothing but frozen light, right? We slow all that back down. What is it that tells the pure energy to become a desk? What is it that tells the energy to become a tree? What is it that tells the energy or informs the energy to become water? In other words, there's an informational component that's missing from Einstein's famous equation. And when we talk about subtle energy, we're talking about information. We're literally talking about the informational fields that inform matter how to be itself, what form to take, and how to perform as that form. So, now getting back to the scientific description of what subtle energy is, in physics there are four known forces: the strong and weak nuclear forces, gravity, and electromagnetism. There are some physicists who would break electricity and magnetism into two forces to make five forces. But those are the basic forces. Subtle energy is any energy that is so subtle that it stands outside of those four known forces. Thus the term subtle energy. And although conventional electromagnetic instruments are not able necessarily to measure subtle energy directly, which they shouldn't be able to anyway, because they're not subtle enough. Okay, they have to be able to, in order to detect something, you have to be able to enter into resonance with it. And in order to be enter into resonance with something, you have to be like that with which you're entering into resonance. And electricity is not subtle energy, so it can't enter into resonance and therefore directly detect it. But we can use other types of instruments to detect the presence or the effects of subtle energy, such that we can be and are certain that subtle energy does exist. It is a real force in the world, and it is incredibly important in terms of consciousness, evolution, and just about anything you can think about. See, one other point about the measurement. So we can measure its effects. Now remember that, you know, just a little over 100 years ago, we couldn't prove that electricity or electromagnetism existed. In other words, we couldn't detect it directly. But we could have, however, detect its effects. We could tell it was there. And that's the same way that we tend to be able to measure the presence of subtle energy in current scientific practice, is by measuring its effects using various tools like the gas discharge visualization camera, which is also called, I think they call it something biophoton imaging, because basically the DNA in all your cells is giving off light and biophotons. And so we can measure the presence or the absence of subtle energy by the effect it has on that biophotonic emission. There are also instruments that we can use, for example, such as heart rate variability, various types of blood tests, so on and so on, to show that the absence or the presence of subtle energy is having a specific effect. So that's a basic introduction to subtle energy as a scientific concept.
That's awesome. I'm always checking, like you're always posting awesome content on Facebook, and I was reading the article that you had yesterday had Tesla, and I think it was by Waking Times about and he was talking about the Schumann resonance and how he found out that it was actually, I guess you would call it a carrier wave. Forgive me, I'm just a marketer. I'm not in the lab like dissecting all this, but he called it a frequency that he could use to broadcast electricity throughout the entire ionosphere or whatever. And that just made me curious. I wonder if Eric someday is going to make a mandala that can light up a light bulb, because that would just be badass.
Well, what you brings up several different things. First of all, interestingly, when we talk about subtle energy, we're often talking about energies that are, although not all subtle energy is associated with what you might call the sacred, all energies that are associated with the sacred are subtle. Okay, and there has been like a modern day teaching that it would be wrong to use subtle energy in general to do things like create light. That would be egoic. You have to, they've kind of devised these rules. Oh no, you've got to use it for this. You can't use it for this. You can't use it for this, so on and so forth. That would be wrong. To create, and in fact, there was one writer who said it would be wrong to use subtle energy to create, be able to light a light bulb and power your house. That would be wrong. Again, if he wants to live by those rules, I mean, he's perfectly welcome to live by those. I don't see anything wrong with that, especially when it's offered as a gift to lift up humanity, and it's offered as a gift for the highest good. Is it possible to do that? My heart tells me it is, but I can't necessarily tell you how to do it at this time. If I knew how to do it, I probably would have already tried it by now. We'll tell you this: there are certain types of there are a lot of experiments that I haven't had time to conduct, simply because I have my hands full with what I have so far. That and even working as much as I do, I don't. There's still a lot that I haven't been able to look into, just because I haven't figured out how to clone myself yet. And but is it possible to power? Well, essentially. Now, I'm glad you brought this up also, because powering a light or electricity or electrical appliances out of the quantum vacuum is certainly possible. And essentially, it's a subtle, what we're talking about here is being able to take the subtle energetic free energy that's coming out of the vacuum and step it down in such a way that you'd run it through a transformer so that it becomes electricity. Now, that said, when we talk about subtle energy, for example, the mandalas that create, like we have a mandala, a new one that we're working on now, that's designed to elicit a state of self-compassion in oneself and towards others. that, in a sense, is free energy too. I think one of the limitations in the current free energy community is that when they talk about free energy, they're specifically talking about drawing, powering things like electrical lights, motor cars, and industrial machines through electricity derived from the vacuum. But virtually any energy that's derived from the vacuum, including self-compassionate subtle energy, is free energy. So essentially, we're a free energy company. That's what we're doing. We're drawing energy out of the vacuum. But it's just not electromagnetic energy. That is not my expertise. But if there's a team of electricians out there, also free energy enthusiasts who are skilled and know what they're doing, I would be happy to work with a team to maybe we could combine our efforts to because I think that being able to draw electricity out of the free energy in a vacuum is primarily a subtle energetic endeavor. Why do I believe that? If you do, what basically, this gets into some of the subtle energy research, so this is good. Dr. William Tiller, who's the professor emeritus of physics at Stanford, he did a series of experiments in which he would take a simple electrical circuit that he designed, and it's kind of like a what's the word? Not a converter, but capacitor. And along with 3 other individuals in his group, he would enter into a deep state of meditation. He's been meditating for about 50 years. So they'll go into a very profound and energetically coherent state of meditation and implant that intention into this capacitor. And the intention might be to pick 1 glass among 3 glasses of water in a lab several hundred miles away, and to lower the pH value of that water to a specific decimal point, and only that glass of water, not the others. Then they'll take that box, smell it off, take that, put it in a box, mail it off to the lab, and sure enough, they get exactly those kinds of results, showing that intention has a subtle energetic body that can be stored on an electrical circuit and transmitted and broadcast, kind of like what we're doing with our technology when we say that you can use one of our digital tools to broadcast subtle energy through your electronic devices. Now, what he also found is when he did this, that lab, that the circuit with the intention programmed into it ended up in, it would condition the space in that lab such that certain things that normally aren't possible would become possible. When he would study the, for example, what were essentially the fluctuations on the quantum level in that lab, he found that they became very coherent and very ordered. They were no longer random. And if I remember correctly, don't take me to task on this specifically, but I think he said he was able to, in this space-conditioned environment, he was able to show that he could demonstrate the actual existence of magnetic monopoles, which typically mathematicians will say, and physics will say that they should exist in theory, but we've never seen them in actuality. So in a conditioned space like this, if I understand correctly, anyway, he's been able to show that with that conditioned space, he can make the impossible possible. Now, that said, there's been other research showing, for example, with Qigong masters, when they express their Qi and they direct their Qi towards a healing, someone in need of healing, they'll get a certain amount of success. But if they'll go into the lab and they'll condition the space in which that lab exists, So in other words, they're raising the consciousness of that space, of the subtle energetic environment in that space, by playing, for example, CDs of Tibetan chants for 2 weeks before they do the experiment. They'll actually increase the results of their experiments by as much as 100%. So they'll start getting 100% results instead of just 50 or 60 or 70. So what is that telling you? It's telling you that, now why am I talking about this in terms of free energy? Because what he found was when you study the life of someone who's working on a free energy device, what's he doing? This person believes in what they're doing so much that they're pumping their own chi into the environment as they build this device, and that chi, which is full of consciousness, and it's conditioning the space such that once they get the free energy device to a certain degree of to where it'll operate, it will start to operate and it'll work as long as it's being used in that space. But if they box it up and send it off to a third-party independent researcher, it won't work for that person. Why is it? It's because subtle energy is needed to condition the space in order to make free energy devices work. So that space conditioning capacity, literally raising the energy of the space in which we dwell, is very important. We hear a lot about gross physical environmentalism and its importance these days, but virtually almost nothing about the subtle environment because there's little to no awareness there. And what the scientific research basically shows is that your subtle energetic environment, that is all of these energies floating in and around your field, in and around your house, some of them having to do with neutrinos coming from distant planets, some of them having to do with cosmic rays, some of them having to do with Wi-Fi and electrosmog in your own home around your computers, and the different types of emotional fields associated with your village, your neighborhood, the people that you're living with. You're all immersed in these different types of fields, whether you realize it or not. So your subtle energetic environment is either squashing your potential or it's amplifying it. It's either obfuscating your higher potential or it's bringing it to the surface. And I believe that this is also the case when it comes to free energy devices. If we're ever going to get to the place where we actually are able to draw enough energy out of the vacuum to power all of our electromagnetic devices, it's going to be because we have a subtle energetic component added to it that conditions the space and allows it to work in that kind of higher efficiency.
Eric,
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Scott. It's nice to talk with you and everybody.
How you doing, brother? It's good to meet you. It's the first time I've seen you live, man. It's good to see you.
Here I am in the flesh, so to speak. I had a question about, I thought you would talk a little bit. One of the things I was curious about with the subtle energy, your technology, is that you take it and somehow encode that into a mandala or an audio. And I had wondered if when I hit play on one of your products, is actual subtle energy coming out of that sound, or if I open up a mandala, is actual subtle energy coming out, or is something happening to the energy with me or my energetic body? And I was
Sure,
curious about that.
That's a good question. Well, first of all, if you were to ask somebody like Ramana Maharshi that question, what he would say is all of these separate energies are just illusion. There's just this. He would, because in a relative sense, that is really true. Really, all of this is one. And when you start making these little differentiations, it's important to understand that in so many terms, we're speaking in relative terms. We're not necessarily speaking absolutely. Mm-hmm. So it's, but yes, when you open up a mandala, there's actual subtle energies encoded into the pixels. As I've said many times, I remember when I first started making these, people would say, well, you've got writing on there and they're not working right because of the writing. And I'd say, no, actually, they would say that not because they had any firsthand knowledge that it wasn't working right. It was just because that was a belief system that they'd been taught. You shouldn't cover the mandala. The energy is coming out because of the mandala design. And I tried to tell them, look, and I've told Michael Marino about this. I could put the energy in a picture of cat poop, and it would still be the energy. Okay,
Right.
I just like to get your attention. You know, like, why do you have to use such language? Well, I'm just but the idea. So, but yes, we do literally put the energy in those pixels such that when you open it up, there is a subtle energetic field that can be measured, or at least the effects thereof can be measured using various type of instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And that energy field will interface with the electromagnetic field that's normally produced by your computer. And then once it begins to enter in resonance with your own field, then yes, it will also start to perpetuate that resonance in your field.
Right. And that's kind of, Eric, is that like information? The energy has information you could say encoded in it.
This is really informational medicine.
Right.
I like that term for this a little bit better because that really, when you talk about energy, you can't talk about energy with talking about information. They really need to go hand in hand. Why is that? Because if all energy was just energy, it'd have no form. There'd be nothing telling it what form to take, why to take that form. Everything takes form because the way it does is because it allows energy to move and conduct in that form in the way that that form needs to produce what it was designed to produce. So even the curvature of our heads, the bell dome of our head is that way for a reason. It conducts spiritual energy. If you look at mosques, temples, domes, even the pyramids are a type of dome. It's a hemisphere, right? But it's got it's got 5 sides technically, but it's still the basic. It's basically in resonance with a hemisphere, and so we find that this idea of hemispheres, you got a curvature to the roof of your mouth. You'll find that the way the brain's unfolded on itself, it creates all these little caves where you have all these little folds, and it turns out that in caves from the Himalayas, where the Tibetan Buddhists would meditate, we see a high presence of a certain type of spiritual energy that can be measured, or the effects thereof, the presence thereof, can be measured in various ways, or is there in caves. So everything takes its shape because of the way that energy is being informed. So what we should really say about energy is it's not just vibration, it's information that's vibrating. It's vibrating information. If everything were just energy, it'd have no form. You see what I'm saying? There's got to be something that differentiates that, and that's information. So essentially, what this is an infoceutical. It's an information medicine.
This is awesome, and everything that you've talked about, especially with environments, has been like a real strong interest of mine, especially when I end up in a neighborhood or some kind of suburban place where I can start to feel like I'm hypersensitive due to an injury I had a while ago, and it's just anything going on in my environment, anything that I play of yours. Walking down the street, I'm sensitive to what's going on. I can feel it. I can feel like the predominant thought forms of the different towns living in Hawaii, for the last 10 years, and living in nature versus living in a suburban neighborhood. People need this stuff. We need to have some way that we can automate the vibration of our environment. Our intention is one thing, but yeah, I put the golden proportion mandala as soon as you made it available. I printed it out. I stuck it on my power box. I want to go stick them on every single power pole in the neighborhood. I really do, because I see these. if you look at an upper class, a wealthy neighborhood, their power lines are underground. They don't deal with as much interference.
That's right.
And if you look at the way like the Chinese live, they live in a mountain with a breeze blowing through.
Yeah.
Now when I'm out in nature around a water source or something, I can feel it. I can feel, and I'm looking at trees as subtle energy devices now. And these streams, I'm like, okay, this is why when you go camping or you get away from all this stuff for a couple of days, your mind resets itself, and you don't think about the same things that you think about when you're sitting at your house or at your grocery store, because it's all influencing us at some level. And I don't know how our body and our neurochemistry, our brain takes it and transmits it into a thought or an action or a behavior, but it just, what you have and what you're creating has not only the potential to change our own lives, but we could change entire neighborhoods or the entire civilization if we just clean or are able to introduce clean energy things, especially now more than ever because we have all this Wi-Fi and we have all this interference. It's literally wreaking havoc on us and making us insomniacs and addicts to all sorts of different things. So, yeah, everything that you said was from my own personal experience, not being immersed in the science. It's absolutely true. So it's just awesome stuff.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you. Thank you for that. One time when I was presenting this, some of this information at a conference, a lady that I could tell, she was probably going through some emotional struggles. I mean, it seemed pretty obvious to me what I could see on her face and hear in her voice. But she said, "How dare you, create these kind of fields, and how dare you make it to where they're creating these large fields that are influencing all of us. Who are you to do that? How do you know that they're healthy?" She really kind of I could tell that whatever inner frustration she was experiencing in her life, she was projecting it on me, and she was kind of angry. And this was in front of a live audience, in person. And I just said, look, the truth is, there is only one mind. There has only been one mind all along. You and I are broadcasting to one another, both locally and non-locally, all the time. We always have been. And what I'm doing is no different. Only thing I'm doing is saying, yes, I'm broadcasting, but I'm broadcasting consciously. I am doing my best to make sure that what I'm broadcasting has a coherence in it that is good for all people, that is a blessing to all living systems, that lifts all people up. If you've ever lived in environments, I was talking to you earlier where the town that I live in here, I'm telling you, man, when I walk into these various stores and I go shopping, when I just go grocery shopping, the employees are not happy to be working. They don't like their jobs. The people here you can tell that they're not happy with their lives. They don't feel they're making enough money. People very rarely smile. If I go to a place, and I do like to drink coffee from time to time. If I go and get a cup of coffee at a convenience store, at 6 in the morning, there will be people walking in. I mean, a line of people walking in with these huge big gulps full of soda at 6 in the morning, because that's what makes them feel good. Because whatever they're feeling is so thick and so heavy, that's what they got to have to make them feel sane in the morning. And so the truth is, when we work in environments, and I've worked in environments where you walk in and your happiness level just drops. You have to work to keep a positive attitude, because the attitudes are so raunchy. People are in bad moods. People are irritable. That is a field, and that field is informing the quantum field that is informing all matter. So as Nassim Haramein would say, we're informing that field, and it's always informing us, and it's non-local. So any emotional state that you're in, I spent a good part of my adult life into depression. So I was making it easier for other people in the world to feel depressed because I was resonating at that level and feeding it back into the field. And because the field is non-local, it made it easier for everyone else to enter into depression. So the more you and I work to feel happier, to live happier, we're actually informing the field, this non-local quantum field that informs all things, and possibly all universes, however many of them there may be, that we're making it easier for all beings field-wide to live at that higher level. And all this technology is doing is it's doing that on a conscious level. And yes, some of the fields that we're producing are very large, but we often need them that way to counteract the negative fields of resonance and information that we're already entrained to. Right? If you think about it, every habit you have is being informed by a field of information. When we're in a place where anything feels possible, I can do it, I can do it. That higher resonant field overrides the habit field, and it cuts it off momentarily so that you can start a new habit and you can move in the direction that you need to move confidently. So everything is resonance, everything is information, and the truth is there is only one mind. We all live in this one mind. There aren't many minds. There's only one. We're all in it, and everything we think, say, or do is influencing everything all the time. You don't have to accept that, but that's the reality that makes the most sense to me, that speaks to me, and try it on like a coat, see how it feels.
That's like it's like a healthy perspective to me, because you're taking responsibility for not just yourself, but for everything in existence. Everything. And the truth is, what somebody is suffering in some remote village of China, if there's somebody in prison who's having their organs taken out because they practice Falun Gong and their organs are being put on the black market because they've got more life force in them, that's affecting me, whether I realize it or not. So I just stay. When I cuddle with my cat, I have two cats, and one of them is just a little lover boy. He loves to get on my chest and purr, and I just love him. And when I sit there and I feel that love for him, I just share it with everyone. When I remember to do so, I just remember to share it with the whole world, plant it into that field, because that quantum field is the soil in which everything we think, say, and do is being planted.
I've got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, regarding the quantum field, when you do like you said, where you have love, you send it out into the world, does that go back into the quantum void? Or I don't know anything about quantum mechanics, but I know that a lot of your work pulls from the quantum void. Or maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't claim to be a quantum physicist. I know a lot of people, when they hear about quantum physics, they also think of different law of attraction teachers which use quantum physics. I've studied quantum physics, and it's interesting because where 10 years ago, if you were to ask me how I feel about quantum physics, I would say that I agree with the Copenhagen interpretation, which basically says that when you look at a thing, you bring it into existence more or less. When you focus on something, your consciousness is creating some type of a feedback loop with that the thing that's being observed and the observer are connected. And it's this, and I still know that in my heart. There is no there in science, as much as I love science, one of the notions in science that's promulgated as a scientific fact is that what the scientific method is designed to do is to get rid of as much subjectivity as possible so that you can arrive at the objective truth, right? And it will say things like, therefore science is valueless. It has no values because it's only about the objective truth. In that, though, is a supposition that's never been proved scientifically, which states that the subjective and the objective are two different things, and that they have no relationship. And, of course, in the wisdom traditions, they come to a completely different view, and that is that the objectivity and subjectivity are one and the same. They're not two different things, and you can't get at the truth only by looking at it from the outside, no matter how many different peer reviews you do and how many different tests that they all do. It's not truth until you've also journeyed inward, not just yourself, but your peers as well, and have verified that quote-unquote truth phenomenologically or subjectively as well as objectively. Because essentially what the wisdom traditions tend to say is that everything is consciousness. Everything has arisen out of subjectivity. If you think about it, science is born out of the mind of humanity, right? I mean, you don't see birds and elk writing theoretical, master's theses on theoretical physics. They don't do that because, for some reason, and it's not to say they don't have intelligence, and it's not to say that they can't figure out methods to do things over and over and over again, because animals can, and they can be very smart. But as far as the pursuit of science in the way that we pursue it as human beings, that pursuit was born out of human subjectivity. It was human subjectivity, the same human subjectivity that wants to understand scientific truth is the same human subjectivity out of which the desire to realize ourselves as spirit emerges. It's one and the same. It's no difference. But so that said, again, we were talking about this idea of subjectivity and how it relates to the Copenhagen interpretation. Basically, these physicists, Niels Bohr, they were in Copenhagen, Denmark, at probably some type of a conference, and that's when they decided, okay, this is the official interpretation that we're going to give to all the quantum physics experiments that we've given. And what we say is that when you look at a thing, your consciousness is creating it. Okay, more or less. But now there was over the years, there has been another interpretation of quantum physics which stands in direct contrast to that one, and it's called the parallel worlds and parallel realities. And basically what it says is that all of these, instead of creating all of these, everything that we see with our consciousness, they all coexist in parallel realities. And so when we decide to view one reality, we're basically entering into resonance with that parallel reality with our conscious focus, how we're observing it. And so we just enter into resonance with that particular parallel reality, and that's what we experience. That still is related to our consciousness and how we're focusing and what we're focusing on. Which one of those are true? I mean, I can't tell you. My heartfelt feeling on it is there's probably truth to both of those. And so as far as how we're feeding that quantum field, what we do know is that vacuum fills all things. It's in everything. And when you look at quantum physics and you look at the wisdom traditions, there seems to be this correlation between what quantum physics is seeing and then what the rishis have said, for example, that everything is arising out of consciousness. Involution. Consciousness is involving down stepping into physical matter, and then evolving back up into spiritual, the spiritual realization. But then you have variations on that. For example, Sri Aurobindo, who would say, well, the key is not just to evolve back up, but to take that higher supermind and bring it down into this involved world, such that it literally transmutes it, such that death is swallowed up for eternity, and we no longer experience death or suffering. So in all of these, though, you have the idea that this field of higher consciousness is ever present. It's here right now. And so the idea is that this field is informing us at all times. It's informing our evolution, and we are informing it. We're programming it as well. But thankfully, and that's why we kind of civilization will stay stuck in certain places, because of that resonant field. You can't make us evolve faster than we want to, you know. But my understanding is that there's something that's accessible through the quantum and yet is somehow outside the quantum as well, beyond the quantum, so to speak, that's feeding all of this, that is higher and more powerful than any impulse to devolve or stay stuck. And that is the impulse behind evolution. It's drawing us upward, and there's nothing more powerful than that. We can resist it, but ultimately, now this is just my understanding, you won't hear all spiritual teachers say this. It's very popular nowadays to say evolution isn't guaranteed. We're all on the brink of extinction. If we don't do something quickly, we're going to kill ourselves. Well, to me, that's faith in our own human frailty, rather than basically letting our senses tell us what's real, rather than letting our hearts, which are connected to this creative principle that's giving rise to all of this, that's more intelligent than what can come through the senses. Instead of getting that supremacy and saying, no, I mean, look, there's a reason why the various theological traditions have this idea of what's the word? Omnipotence, of God being omnipotent. Because omnipotence, by definitions, means it can't be overpowered. It can't be overpowered. And so my heart tells me to keep my words, my thoughts, as best I can, aligned with that which, simply by virtue of being itself, is already perfect. And as long as we stay aligned with that, it has to win out, because I've heard some people say, well, no, not necessarily. The ego could destroy itself and everything will just keep on being what it is. Well, not necessarily, if there's a profound reason for our consciousness being here in the first place. There seems to be this symbiotic union between all of this earth and human consciousness, such that, and this is just my personal vision, if others don't agree with it, that's perfectly fine. My vision is that when we evolve, and it's to the point that it literally transmutes our bodies, it will, because we're in symbiotic union with everything else will also be transmuted. That there's a symbiotic relationship between human consciousness and all of nature. And but without getting lost in all that, again, the idea is that this quantum field, this ever-present potential, is always right here, and somehow we're informing it, and it's always informing us. I think that's the best way I know how to state it, and the truth is, do I have a perfect grasp of it? No, but that's the best way I know how to explain it. And when I compare that with the other inspirations in my life, whether it be physics and particularly, innovative physicists like Nassim Haramein, or spiritual teachers like Ramana Maharshi and so on, Sri Aurobindo, it seems congruent with those kinds of things.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah. Anybody else? We're getting up to it. This really goes by fast, but my intention was to get it to as many questions. I don't know how many people we've got on tonight, but if anybody's got any questions and cares to stay a little bit longer, I'm happy to answer questions.
I think there's like 1,000 people in here.
Seriously?
No, I'm just playing.
Okay.
Not yet.
Okay, we got any questions, guys?
There's a question from David Bell earlier that says, since coming across your works, I've been interested in the idea that these energies can be somehow transmitted through the internet and Wi-Fi signals across far distances.
Yeah, I've actually had, there's one guy, he wants me to create a signature that can be transmitted to the entire internet simultaneously that will automatically enlighten everybody. You know, you have to be careful with doing those types of things because I don't want to impose my will on other people. But the other thing is, how do you broadcast to the entire internet at once? I don't know how you would do that unless you had some type of a master broadcasting station that was connected to all the different Wi-Fi towers around the world. I personally don't have expertise in Wi-Fi and how the internet is set up. If I understood how to do that, or if I had somebody on the team who understood how to do that, then yes, theoretically it would be possible to create a signature that could be beamed out to the entire internet 24/7.
To answer your question, we have about 9 or 10 people in here right now.
Okay. Any other questions, you all? Let's see. If Scott, if anybody has any more questions, feel free to chime in.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And it relates to neurology, and because my main background in study before I started, well, I've always been a sucker for meditation products. It wasn't until I found you that I was like, oh, these are actually awesome. No, I probably did some serious damage to my brain with brainwave entrainment back in the day and blasting gamma rays in there or whatnot. But I'm curious as to my main background of study has been in sacred geometry, and it's actually been in brainwave states and these crazy breathing techniques to induce certain brainwave states. And the process has been clearing out charges in memories, and I've learned that a lot of the way that our physicality or our bodies or our life operates is based on these memory systems. And I'm just wondering how you would think, and I don't know if you would even have the answer to this, when we start to put this energy in our field, how that's transmitted in our neurology. Like, will that, a lot of the times when I was doing the Shanthi meditation with my ears the other night, and different meditations, a lot of them do bring up memories, just like sometimes slews of them. And I'm just wondering if you've had experience with this, or what you think the relationship of subtle energy is to memory itself, human memory.
Oh, great question. Well, okay, so what that reminds me of is, for those of you who are interested in the science of subtle energy, I recommend anything, any book, any workshop done by a fellow by the name of Claude Swanson. He's written a book called Life Force, the Scientific Evidence, and he's an MIT trained, Princeton trained physicist. I got to, I've read his books. A lot of the things you hear me talk about in terms of subtle energy science come from particular scientific studies that he's highlighted in his books, because he really has brought together all the different types of subtle energy studies into 2 books that, if you read those 2, you're going to have they're probably the 2 best books to read on the subject. But I did I did get to go see him when I lived in Boulder, and he was talking about the biofield, the biophotonic field, the aura, and he was saying that the aura and the biophotonic field was made up of what he called torsion. If you've ever heard me talk about subtle energy, you'll hear me use the term torsion. Torsion and subtle energy are basically the same thing. It just means that subtle energy, by nature of itself, it's always twisting and turning. It's moving, so it twists the space in which it exists. And I just raised my hand and I said, "So, are you? So then, if I understand you correctly, what you seem to be saying is that torsion and memory are the same thing." And he said, "Bingo, that's it." So memory, subtle energy, and torsion are kind of the same thing. So, well, what does that mean? Okay, so staying in the realm of science, if we look at biologist Rupert Sheldrake's theory of morphogenetic fields, they've also been called habit fields, because literally what they do is these are informational fields that are made up, that are built up over time through habits of biological species. Okay, they're not the same thing as, say, the ideas of Plato, where an idea, a form, or the ideal forms, where a form comes straight out of an idea, out of the heavens, or straight out of spirit, so to speak. No, that's different. That's how forms take shape originally, but how they evolve over time has to do with morphogenetic fields, habit fields. So what's another way of calling that? Memory fields. They're literally the reason, according to him, and I agree with him, the reason why certain traits of biological species grow and evolve over time is because there are these non-physical informational fields, which are literally memory themselves. So it's literally, we talked about, we said that the energy is truly, it's vibrating information. That's what memory is. It's vibrating information. Now the whole, if you think about it, if you have no memory of anything, if nothing ever had memory, your body would forget to be itself. It would dissolve. Right? If you have no memory of anything, in a sense, and this is congruent with what some of the enlightened masters have said, in a sense, you would be enlightened, because you would have lost all preconceived ideas of who you are and all identification. So memory is, wherever you have form, you have memory, because in order for that form to remain what it is, it has to remember what it is. It has to keep receiving that memory. So like every morning when you take your vitamins, you're feeding the memory of vitamins back into your body so that it doesn't forget. There are certain types of memories that have to be replenished. In a sense, all form is memory. Now, when you meditate, it makes sense. When you go into certain deep states, memories are going to come. Sometimes you'll have childhood memories you hadn't thought about since you were a kid. They'll just come up, and that's partially because when you go down in those deeper states, now in the Eastern traditions, like Vedanta and the Buddhist traditions, all memory is stored in what's called the substrate consciousness. In terms of brain waves, that would be right about the delta epsilon range. That's where everything's kind of written there. It's kind of like, that's where all the memory is stored. That's why entering into those deep states can be important to release those types of imprints, They call them samskaras in Vedanta. Samskara is a memory. It's an imprint. And it typically takes place in the higher subtle and the lower causal, or in the causal itself. And that's why entering in those deep states can be important, to let go of those memories, be able to witness them and feel them deeply without identifying with them, so that they can wash out, and so on and so forth. But essentially, when you're down in those deep states, you're entering into resonance with those memories, because those memories are written on those places, on those subtle and causal structures that tend to resonate at the theta and delta levels, and in those areas. Memory tends to be associated with theta, delta, and epsilon. So also called the unconscious as well. So yeah, when you enter in those deep states, you will have memories like that. That's why sometimes in some studies you have scientists who don't know any better, who are studying meditation. They get these people who are going down to deep states, and they start reliving certain traumas, and they say, oh, meditation's bad for you. It's not bad for you. No, you're not doing it right. You're getting down there just enough to experience the trauma, but you don't have enough absorption to be able to, or wisdom and guidance to be able to occupy that trauma on a deep feeling level and a deep witnessing level without identifying with it. And if you were able to do that, it would just wash right out of you, because you're no longer identifying with it, but you're connecting with it on a conscious level. Your consciousness is creating that conduit for that trauma to release, that imprint, that memory, right? And the way to let it move up and out of you is to journey right into the epicenter of the intensity of the feeling associated with that memory, and keep gravitating towards the epicenter of that intensity, the center, the center, the center, the center, the center of 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 the intensity of the feeling, and over and over reorienting to that center and diving down into it so that you feel it, but you're letting it wash up and through you. And when you do that, you're literally using your consciousness to heal and release that memory. And that's a torsion field. It's a torsion field that's keeping a certain identity locked into you, into your energetic being.
Good stuff.
Well, it's and I don't claim to have this all perfected myself, but that is the basic. That's what I'm experiencing as I go through this myself. Yeah.
So does that happen to you when you start to use this technology, or when you're meditating? Do you ever find that, like, just a bunch of stuff can be unearthed? Like,
oh, absolutely. And sometimes I don't notice any phenomena at all.
Yeah.
But the key is to get in touch with the epicenter of the intensity of the feeling that's associated with whatever phenomena is coming up, and stay locked into that and witness it, and witness whatever arises with it, and just keep reorienting with your consciousness towards the epicenter of the center of the center of the center of the center of the intensity. And as you do that, it's like, because again, we talk about what is memory. It's a torsion field. What is torsion? It's a spinning. Where do you stay free from the spinning? In the center. This is science. I mean, you get into the eye of the tornado. So the more you stay in the center of it, the more you stay consciously locked in with it without identifying with it, because you don't get caught up in the maelstrom of the story behind it.
Yeah, and it goes along with what it's like. The emotion is the glue that holds it together.
It is true.
Cool.
Emotion is tied to the heart, and the heart's the first thing that pumps before the brain's even formed. Life force enters through the heart. Life force is torsion. Life force is intelligence, right? So again, we get back to this torsion, this spinning, and they say when you're manifesting anything, emotion is the key. Feeling it in your heart. Why? Because my understanding is that's what's adding the life force to your vision. That's what's bringing it alive and stepping it down into reality. Anything that enters into reality through us as humans enters first through the heart. That's what really gives life. And so if our identity is caught up in these negative emotions, which are the pains of the heart, that essentially, and we keep them in our field, one of although there are teachers out there, for example, Ken Wilber teaches that the shadow never appears in meditation. With all due respect to him, I disagree. And essentially, because what we're talking about is the shadow. When those memories come up, anything of an emotional nature is tied to the shadow, is always a part of the shadow. I won't go into why that is right now, but the shadow and emotions are profoundly related. Wherever you've got one, you've got the other, or potentially. And so when you're feeling any type of memories that have emotions tied to them, that is a key that here's an opportunity for shadow work. If you can dive into the center of that, the epicenter of the intensity of that feeling with your consciousness. And again, this technology can help with that because it makes your consciousness coherent enough to be able to stand in the middle of that without getting overwhelmed. I had to go deep and deep and deep and deep until it just starts to lift. And literally, I see it as it just twirls and twirls and twirls until it comes out of the heart and it comes out of the head and just rises up, and you can see it rising up. Again, that gets back to the idea that emotion is tied to whatever we're manifesting in our lives. Because emotion is part of the heart is what channels the life force, intelligence, into what we want to manifest. So if we've got those negative emotions coming up during meditation, that's really saying, hey, look, this is an opportunity to let those go, and to dive in them further, feel them. And again, without going on too much more, because I feel like a broken record right now, the one thing I'm trying to differentiate here is, in the past, what someone would have said is, just witness the emotions, just witness it. But that's not enough, because it's possible to witness those memories or those feelings without actually feeling them. So you're literally dissociating yourself from them. What I'm talking about is doing both. You dive into the epicenter of the feeling so that you're connected with it. You're not trying to avoid it, but you witness it at the same time so that you're not getting caught up in the story. If your mind all of a sudden is saying, well, he said this, and I meant to make them understand that I really meant this, and da-da-da, then you're no longer in the epicenter of it. You're in the maelstrom. You've been caught up in the maelstrom. You're caught up in the story. As long as you're in the center, you're not talking. You're paying attention to the epicenter of the intensity of the feeling associated with those memories coming up, and the more and the deeper you can do that, the more you will notice they will release over time, and your identity and your life will start to change.
Nice. Okay, we have a couple of questions that have came through on the Google event page. Can you see the sidebar here?
I can.
They start at 4:01 p.m.
Okay, I don't see that. Okay, so I've been also, from Dave Bell, I've been also trying to get an elaboration on something I've come across that describes subtle energy more as subtle or pure substances of truth or true nature. I'm getting this from a book called Essence by A.H. Olmos, who references Sufi metaphysics, Tibetan Buddhism, and Sri Aurobindo. Okay. Yes, I would concur, but that is not to say that everything that arises from the subtle and the causal is true. As we said earlier, I have two instances to back up what I just said. The first is what I just mentioned earlier, that in many of those same traditions you just mentioned, for example, just the idea of subtle memory. And that also gets, and that could be a false identity. It could be an imprint of the untrue, basically, that is left in the higher subtle and in the lower causal, or even in the causal. And that can emanate from the causal and the higher subtle, but it's not necessarily true. Okay, so that's something to keep important, or to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is, although I agree with that statement that the true arises from the subtle and causal, I think there is a limitation to that, and let me preface that by saying, so for example, in these same traditions, they tend to say that everything we see with the physical eye is an emanation from the subtle and the causal. In other words, that the gross physical world emanates from the subtle, and the subtle world emanates from the causal. So that would mean, but yet in those same traditions, they say that everything we see out here is the untrue. It's part of the illusion. And in fact, even in terms of physics, we know that duality, which is the untrue, duality is encoded into the deepest levels of physical existence. When you get down to electrons, you have anti-electrons, anti-protons and anti-protons. Everything has its anti. Every quark has its anti. Why? That's because death, which is what manifests in the dualistic world, is a lie. It was never intended to be, and it is part of the lie in this world that we live in. It was not. It's not the true. If it were true, then everything would die and implode on itself. But there is something that stands outside the world of duality, outside the causal even, that keeps life rebirthing, renewing, and evolving. That principle is stronger than death. This also concurs with the newest studies in near-death experiences, where people coming back from these experiences say death is a lie. It was never meant to be. The way reality truly is beyond death. Death is an illusion. So that said, I think there's an aspect of the causal and the subtle that's giving rise to this illusion that we see with the senses that is not the truth, and that takes discernment. The way R. Obendo put it is that there was a supermind intelligence that if we are able to truly realize it, we can bring it down into this world, and it will transmute the world such that the lie of death will no longer hold sway. That's how I see it, but I respect these other opinions on it. I would personally take them as opinions rather than truth. You should probably take what I say as an opinion as well. But do try it on as a code. See how you like it. Think about it. Contemplate on it. Find out what this means for you. From Michael Marino, he says, I just had that happen with self-compassion. It brought up a deep pocket of sadness after feeling the initial hugging feeling that I felt. And this is a new signature that we're working on for self-compassion. So yeah, you may feel types of emotions to come up and such. And they're coming up to be felt. It's really important to feel them, to get in contact with them, and to sit with them rather than to identify with them and to necessarily live from those emotions. Another question. Any possibility of developing a mandala for something along the lines of thankfulness, gratitude, finding the good, savoring the good? Absolutely. You know, the truth is, most of the things that you guys suggest to me, I've already thought of, and I already have a list for. But as I've mentioned, the process in making this, as I do it now, it does take a certain amount of time. So I'm typically working literally 24/7. Even I automate things to be working when I go to sleep, and it still just takes this long. So I'm always open to your suggestions, but just realize that it may be a year before I can get to all these, because it just takes so long to get this technology to a point that the average person can feel it, because in my experience and in my opinion, most people are conditioned to not be very sensitive to subtle energy. And especially when you're trying to produce it all through a digital medium, it can be very challenging to get it strong enough that the average person can feel that energy in spite of their own aspects of consciousness and identity that often obfuscate the reality of subtle energy from them. But yes, there is a possibility. I would love to do something like that. It just may be a while before I could get to it. Another one from David Bell. Any advice on making a resonant healing space for healing professionals, such as psychotherapists or medical professionals? Again, so for example, we're working on one of the new programs that's going to be coming out here in a couple weeks is called Shanthi, the energetic signature of unconditional peace. So for something like that, all you would need to do is just, if you have a computer in your therapeutic space where you work with a client, you would just pull up that audio, and on your computer you can turn the volume of it all the way down. You can even pull a few of the mandalas up, because it comes with a mandala as well. It's an audio and a mandala. And amplify it as much as you need to. You can pull up multiple audios, put them on repeat, and then just turn the volume of them all the way down, and continue to work with your client in an environment that's designed to elicit deep peace. And because you're only going to be working with them for, say, a half an hour or an hour at a time, then you might want to amplify it particularly strong so they can really feel it, because the way a lot of our beta testers have been using it is, opening one audio and playing it all day long, and you will get immersed in this deep sense of peace. But if you're working with clients and you've only got 30 minutes with them, you might want to amplify it really, really strong, and then just play it on your computer in that space, or play it on your phone, or you can even print out multiple prints and put it under a cushion on which the client sits or lays. You can use any of the prints of the mandalas for under yoga cushions, under cushions that your clients are sitting on. You can give them copies of that print to take home with them. They can put under their mattress, under their pillows, under their seat cushions. So yeah, and really, you don't need my permission to experiment with different ways of doing this. It's safe, but the basic instructions I gave you are pretty simple, and do feel free to experiment. Well, as far as I can see, I'm not seeing any more questions, guys. I really appreciate you all being here. We're about an hour and 25 minutes into it, so as I mentioned, this is going to be a bi-weekly thing. Hopefully we'll get more people to show up. I didn't email this out to the whole list. I only put a 2-day notice of it on Facebook. Probably next time we'll send it out to the whole list, but we wanted to keep this informal because we're still getting things organized. Not everything is organized as it will be. And anyway, I'm really thrilled to have you all here. I'm thrilled to share whatever I have to help you get the most out of this technology. And if you have any more questions, save them up for the next time.
Yeah, we have just a couple of minutes left. There was one question I think that you may have skipped over, which is Michael is asking, where do you see this technology going? What possibilities do you see on the horizon?
Say that again?
Where do you see this technology going? What possibilities do you see on the horizon?
First of all, I'll state by what I can see that the potential is further than what I can see. It's so vast, it boggles my mind. But basically, I see being able to power our vehicles with our own life force energy. I mean, that means your car, or something like it. I see us being able to communicate one another telepathically using a version, something like this technology. I see this technology evolving into being able to program, create non-local links to any computer so that I can program it to any decimal point of accuracy in any type of automation process it may be involved in, so that there's literally no more error. And it's linked to my own consciousness, so I get it. I know exactly when it's off and when it's on, and all I have to do is just send an intention, and it's back on point. I see a time when we are so conscious of subtle energy that we see the life in everything. And I literally see this technology getting to the point to where it vibrates our inner potential for eternity so profoundly that we overcome death. We literally stop dying. And that doesn't mean that we just live forever in our current state of consciousness. It means that as our bodies stop dying, the whole culture that gave birth to death in the first place dies. We let go of it, and we let go of identifying with our separate identities. I see us being at a point where, when, for example, Jason, when I see you move, I experience it as though I'm moving in you. Because our consciousness will start to raise up. That is the reality anyway. The truth is, there is only one consciousness. There is only one mind. We're just not experiencing it that way. In short, the way I put it for our mission statement is, I envision heaven on earth, where somebody said, well, does heaven even exist? Well, I don't want to get in a theoretical argument over all that. But let me ask you this. If I ask the average person, does death exist in heaven? Most people would say no. Some really smart guy or somebody trying to be really clever, oh yes, because death is not attachment. Well, you know, don't try not to get too smart for me here, okay? Because the truth is, when you look at near-death studies, you see people reporting meeting other beings who have an identity, a separate identity, but they're also completely in step and in resonance with the universal identity as well. And they experience no death, they experience no separation, they experience no suffering, they experience no poverty. And so what we find there, and yet they're not attached to their identity. So this whole notion that death is necessary to experience non-attachment is not true. You don't have to have death and suffering to experience and to know non-attachment. You can practice non-attachment to get there, but you can use death and use poverty and suffering to experience and to know non-attachment, but it's not absolutely necessary. In my understanding, that is one of the lies we've been fed. And I do foresee a future when we will no longer be identified with that smaller ego self, and therefore will no longer, we just won't require death anymore. We won't believe in it anymore. And we'll have a subtle energetic environment that vibrates at such a high level, literally the cells in our body will forget to die. They will only know life, because that will be all there is. And in truth, that is all there is. There is no opposite to life. If there was, everything would cease to exist, because a house divided against itself can stand. Right? I mean, it's impossible for a house, you take the foundation and split it down the middle, it's impossible for it to stand once you split that foundation. It can't do it. The physical foundation, as we talked about, has duality or division programmed into it. So it cannot stand. Death cannot stand. At some point, what is eternal we are beings of light, that will become prominent, and that's what I see this technology facilitating. Now, I realize that's a radical view that I myself might not even be able to demonstrate. For example, I may die somewhere down the road, but I do believe, I am convinced that I will have a long lifespan, and that we will eventually be able to dial this technology into such a place that anything living within its influence will no longer understand death, because we'll just be in the vibration or the presence of life, and death as a memory will just fade. It just won't be there anymore. In a sense, that's what aging is. It's a cell forgetting how to reproduce itself perfectly. That's what aging is. So that's part of it, and I really feel like even that is just the scratching the surface of what's possible.
Right on. Good stuff, man. I'm really glad that I was able to be here on this first call.
Anyway, I appreciate you all, man. I love Jason, you, Mitchell, and Joshua. I love having you guys on the team. I want to give a shout out to my customer service agent, Michael, who just does a great job with customer service. I couldn't do this without him. And all of you on the line, all of our customers, you guys are funding this venture. Without you, I would not be able to do this research, and so you are incredibly important, and I'm very grateful for you. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. So we will be doing more of this probably weekly, and next week Josh wants to go through the site a little bit, so we can do that next week and just show you guys around, or he can show you around and show you how it all works and what we have planned for that. But yeah, just amazing content.
Okay, guys, 2 weeks from tonight, we'll see you here. Feel free to invite a friend and bring any questions.